And we learned a lot of ways not to do it. And so I think that because they didn't go through all these things, I see some of them making the same mistakes we did a long time ago.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools, and I'm joined today by Ivan Burazin, who is the founder of Daytona and has had a very, very interesting developer tools career, including most recently being the VP of DevX at Infobip. Ivan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. So first I have to say I'm the co-founder, so not solo founder. I have two more founders in Daytona. So just wanted to add that, and thanks for having me here.
So, Ivan, could you tell us a bit about Daytona and what you're doing?
Sure. So Daytona is a development environment management and orchestration platform, which is a lot of words for saying basically Daytona enables any developer to clone their repository and instantly start coding. Everything that you'd have to do beforehand, setting up any dependencies, installing anything before that, which usually doesn't work right out of the box, is automatically done. And we do it with a specific focus for enterprise companies.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like how you list out like all the things that you do. So, you'll get your code, you'll clone the repo, check out the branch, study the README, install tools and dependencies, run the build, resolve environment conflicts, and then you might, if you're lucky, be able to write some code.
Absolutely. But I feel that's so when I was writing code, and this is like 1999, 2000 for the younger people listening, it might be a long time ago. I remember that you basically opened up your editor, you started coding, and then you sort of just deployed it somewhere to see how it works, or you ran it localhost. But there was nothing underlying. There was no issues you needed to solve to be able to start working, right? And so I think that's something that we want to bring back, because for people trying to get into the industry, it's a huge hurdle to learn to code and to figure out, is the code running because, or not running because you made an error, or because the dependencies or whatever underlying development environment isn't set up properly, right? But also, if for the senior people as well, it's just a huge waste of time. Like we've seen that engineers waste anywhere from like 50 to 70% of their productive time being the time that they would otherwise be coding on, development environment issues, waiting for tests and builds and stuff like that.
Yeah. And this is like not the first foray that you've had in helping people to code quickly, right?
Absolutely. This is our second time. So our first time was with Code Anywhere. So Code Anywhere was, or is, still sort of exists, a browser-based IDE. So the idea was, we started this in 2009. It was called PHP Anywhere. Then we renamed it to Code Anywhere. So I think we were basically the first to ever try that, or one of the first. I lie. Heroku was the first. So Heroku started it and then killed it and then made Heroku. We didn't know that happened, and then we started our own thing. A bit of success, but really, really early. Technology was not there. The market wasn't ready. People weren't ready. People weren't open to it. So it was very early. And now I feel that the technology and awareness, especially because of Codespaces, the product from GitHub, has very much pushed knowledge and awareness around this type of solution.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think there's anything like looking back that you learned like from doing that? Because it's something that I think now so many people are really excited about this kind of space as well.
Oh, I learned how not to do it. So they're like, the quote is from Edison, like you learned 1,000 ways not to do it. And so I think that we pushed it for a while. So it was 2009 till I think 2016. We were pretty active doing that. So quite a chunk of time. And we learned a lot of ways not to do it. And I think that's sort of, we've incorporated that into the new product. And when we see competitive products, because they didn't go through all these things, I see some of them making the same mistakes we did a long time ago. So I think that is our advantage, that we've been here we're just old. That's sort of our competitive advantage, I think.
Yeah, you've seen everything. And actually that leads us on to like a really good trajectory, because one of the things I wanted to do was, you've had a lot of stages to your career, as I mentioned. So you started out with founding a couple of companies. It was a very early acquisition that you had. And then you founded Code Anywhere, right? and then you were at Infobip, and now Daytona. So I wondered if we could kind of walk through those and talk about the things that you learned along the way in each of those steps.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, the first company was not so much a startup. It was a system integrator company. So basically, a company that would sell you and implement or set up Cisco routers and Wi-Fi networks and things like that. So clients would be like hotels or office buildings or whatnot. And the reason I started that company was because I was working for this other company running IT basically. And I wanted to, well, basically I was scared to quit for some reason and I could not progress anymore in the company. And so I told the owner of the company, I'm like, hey, let's split this out into its own company, thinking like so I can offer services to the rest of the market, thinking that he'd say no, and then that would be my way out. He said yes, and I ended up founding a company. And so I did not know anything about business, so I didn't know the difference between EBITDA or cash flow or all these. Like I did not know anything. I knew I had to set up, routers and Wi-Fi and things like that. So I learned everything the hard way. It was not an easy journey, but when I started understanding things, I understood that I could not create an impact or impactful company doing that. So I basically sold it to a local competitor. So that was my first little exit. Made a bit of money, nothing great, and then started on our journey with Code Anywhere. And Code Anywhere, as mentioned, so we did that for quite a while. We were in Techstars, which was cool then. We lived in Boston for a while. And so, yeah, we raised a bit of money, about $850,000 for that. But it sort of plateaued. We didn't know how to scale it further. And so basically at one point we, paid our investors back and sort of left that as like an internet business on the side. And I focused on creating the conference, which is called Shift, which is actually pretty successful now.
Yeah, sorry, that was one of the things I had on my list I didn't even bring up. It's very successful. That's a huge conference in Croatia, right? It's like thousands and thousands of developers.
It's about 5,000 developers now, yeah.
Yeah. And how did Shift get started?
So Shift got started as a way to give back to the community. So while we were doing Code Anywhere, we went to a lot of, we didn't know how to raise money. We didn't know a lot of things. And I guess that's how it is. So I knew that there were pitch competitions at conferences where there were investors. And so the idea was we get in front of investors by going to pitch competitions. So we applied to all these pitch competitions. And so we got in everywhere. So Tokyo, Beijing, London, Vienna, San Francisco, New York. Like we were on stages everywhere. Like we always got in. No one ever gave us money, not once, all those pitch competitions. But I really enjoyed the conferences. Like the energy in those places were really great. And nothing like that existed in Croatia where I lived. And I'm like, why don't I because I met all these people, why don't I try to organize one here? And I have never organized anything larger than a birthday party. So I had no idea what I was doing. But yeah, the first one was pretty bad personally. People enjoyed it, but in the sense I was doing anything. I was being the MC, having a stage fright. I was like putting up microphones. Like you didn't have a budget, so you had to do a lot of things. I had help from friends, but still it was very hands-on. So yeah, we built that. And I said I would never do it again. And then people said, oh, it was great. You should do it again. We'll sponsor you. And we're like, okay, we'll do it again. Then I announced it. And then when it comes like 2 months to the conference, yo, can you sponsor me? And they're like, no, there's no budget this year. And so we ended up losing money for the first 3 years on the thing. But it kept growing like people-wise. Like it was like 250 people, then like 300, then 500. So it kept growing. And eventually it started, actually developers became a hot commodity and everyone wanted to hire developers. And then sponsors came in to want to actually sponsor it because they wanted access to software engineers. And that's where it actually really started growing. And we ended up doing 3 conferences a year. It became my full-time thing after we sort of dropped Code Anywhere. And I ran that up until 2020 when we were acquired by Infobip.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I have that questions there. Like I've done events before and I know it's so stressful. Nothing compares to the night before an event. So could you talk a bit about like what was it that made Shift, popular? Do you think that what did people like about Shift?
So one thing, there's multiple aspects of a conference or any event, right? So you have the show, so the speakers, the people that are coming there. That's like one aspect. The other aspect are the attendees, the people that come there as well. The third part are the people that finance the conference itself, so sponsors and whatnot. And then you have the organization. So basically but 3 outside of your control, right? And so, and we learned this by trying. Like I didn't understand any of this before. There's very few. I actually started buying books about the event industry about a year or 2 before I sold it, not before that, but there's very few books. At one point I was contemplating writing a book. I had to organize these things because there's not. And it's super stressful. But when you sort of figure out the building blocks, it becomes a lot easier. And so what seems to be, for me, the way to keep getting good speakers is be very good to your speakers. And so we always try to, even if we didn't have enough money, we'd have a driver pick them up. We'd get them a flight. Like it was economy class, like, but it's still like we'd get your ticket. A driver with your name would be waiting for you. There'd be a dinner for the speakers to get to know each other. And at one point we stopped doing that more because speakers just don't have time. But we used to do like sailing and stuff like a day after just for the speakers, right? And so when you do all these things for the speakers, I found that they are very impressed and enjoy that. Even like last year or this year, when I was at the conference, speakers like, you guys just take so good care of us. And I'm like, don't they do that at other conferences? Like for me, it's like unheard of. I haven't spoken at that many conferences, so I don't know. And they're like, no, it's wonderful. And that's sort of on one side. When you're really good to your speakers, then they are your advocates, both for the attendees and both for other speakers. And they want to come to speak with you, which I think is really great because essentially the show, the centerpiece of the conference, then continually wants to come, right? The second part is we try to create serendipitous encounters for our attendees. I'm very much a person that went to a lot of conferences, but I would never go listen to any talk. The idea was, for me, a conference is meeting people, right? And if I meet good people, then I like the conference, I'll come back. And so it's like, how do we make things memorable for people and keep it in their mind? And so you'll see things like the soundtrack of the conference will have the same couple of songs repeat the entire time when things are happening, so that gets in your mind and people will talk about it. And when they hear the song 6 months later, they think about the conference. Another thing is that like you always, like food and drinks are always for free, but we always have like cocktails that are being made at the conference, both cocktails and mocktails. And people like to stand in line for those cocktails, and like they're talking about them, and you'll talk with someone in front of you or behind you. Oh, this is good or this is bad. It gives you sort of like an icebreaker with people that you don't know. And also, so I also like cars, and I was fortunate enough to get Porsche as a sponsor for the last 3 years. And so you can drive Porsches at our conference. So like the first time a person would drive a GT3 would be at our conference. And that is a memorable event for someone that likes cars,
That's
right?
a really memorable
Right.
event.
And then they talk to other people about it. And they're like, oh, I was at this conference. I drove like a sports car. And there's also simulators, and the winner gets to a trip every year to Istanbul to race on the actual racetrack. So like we also try to do very well with the parties, bring in some DJs. It's like, how do we create memorable events around the conference, or better yet, events where people have to interact with people that they don't know? And I think that is the key factor of what we do. So it's super laid back. And if you've seen the pictures, now it's in a stadium. So it's like a 360 degree. Have you seen the pictures?
No, that's me.
Can I show you here? Can I show you here what it looks like really quickly? I guess we'll share it with other people somewhere. So this is the stage.
Wow, that is amazing. Let me describe what I'm seeing here. It's almost like a coliseum of like everyone around a kind of a stage in the middle of a huge screen. Lighting looks unbelievable. Yeah. Wow. How do the speakers engage? Like
so it's a 360 stage. So it's very odd for speakers if they haven't done it. But when they get used to it, I think it's okay. It's a bit disorienting sometimes when I'm on the stage as well. You sort of lose track where you are. Yeah. But we were forced to do it because there was no other venue that could have that many people, and the only venue that was close was this circular venue. Yeah. And we ended up using that to our benefits, because the outer rim are where the sponsors are, where the lounge area is, and where food and beverages are. And the thing is, you can't get lost because you just don't turn around, just keep walking in the same direction, and you will get to where you want to go because it's circular. Yeah. And so, but anyway, I get back to the conference. It wasn't always this big, but that is sort of what we built it on, and people really like it for all these things. And obviously,
Yeah.
the content is great because the speakers you've seen that have been there are awesome, and I thank them for coming. And yeah, we just made a really, really fun event for people. And I did not sleep a lot because of the conference. True to your point, and I could talk about that as well if interesting. But
Yeah. One of the things I kind of wanted to ask there is like about what it was like then going to when Infobip acquired the conference, and like how I guess like they will like if they own it, they're like they have like marketing objectives around like the conference, and I wondered like what was that like as well?
so Infobip, just to give a story, Infobip is a competitor to Twilio. So it's one API for voice, email, SMS, whatnot. And so they're huge. They're a company you've probably never heard of that started in a village in Croatia, bootstrapped to $1 billion in revenue, to $1 billion, no external funding. They raised a bit the last couple of years, but that was just for M&A. So they're at like $2 billion now. They're still private. They're the only large competitor that's still private. So we'll see when the IPO window seems to be opening again. So we'll see what happens. Good luck to them. And anyway, so what they wanted to do, they were a top-down wholesale resale company, not a bottom-up like Twilio. Twilio started with like Ask Your Developer, the famous, they have a book about it right now. So they wanted to get to the developer because their comparable companies, 40 to 50% of their revenue originates bottom-up, and they had no access to that. And so acquiring the conference was like, okay, we have now access to, $5,000 a year at least. So they brought me on. I became the Chief Developer Experience Officer, and I ran not just the conference, but the DevRel team, the startup team as well. Startups are like a startup program that AWS has or whatever. Like get the good startups, offer them free credits, they use the service, and hopefully when they scale, they'll use us as a customer. And so I basically had to set that up. The good thing was that Shift in the developer community was a bigger brand than Infobip. So they let it be as is. So the idea is, and it still hasn't, they're still very lenient on the team, whereas they can do whatever they want, bring whatever they want. And Infobip is sort of just like a backstory sponsor, their flags are in the background. So when you think of the conference, it's like, oh, Infobip basically it sponsors it in that sort of way, but it gets their attention of developers without marketing them on anything specific.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've met DevRels from Infobip. Very nice people, actually.
There you go.
Yeah,
there's a lot. There's a lot in this neck of the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that top down versus bottom up, and was that something that when you came in, you were like, we need to be doing more bottoms up, or was that?
So their initiative was they wanted it.
Yeah.
So they acquired the conference. They brought me on because they like, we don't know how to do this. Can you do this? And so it's always hard. There's a lot of articles from people. It's like, don't be the first DevRel hire because you're usually not set up for success. Because if the company is large enough, the company has a completely different way of working. And this is true. Like when I came into Infobip, it was like 2,500 people. When I left, it was almost 4,000. And so this is like a very top-down, enterprise-focused type of company. And now you're jumping in. It's like, hey, we have to fly over the world, do meetups and conferences. And like a lot of people in the company think that you're just spending money and having fun and not working. So there's a lot of barriers, mental, that we had to break inside the company to allow us to do what we wanted to do. But yeah, I think we were very successful in doing that.
What do you think was successful? Like,
So you just mentioned that you've met people from Infobip.
Yeah.
Like that didn't happen 3 years ago because there was none, right? So Infobip now, I think the teams that I managed, both startup and DevRel, did about 30 conferences last year. They also won. I had already left, but I'm super proud. They won like best DevRel program of last year. And they also won the other category, best community DevRel program of last year. So there was an initiative to do meetups across the African continent. So a colleague of mine, they're in Nairobi actually right now, but they did, I think, 7 or 8 countries around Africa, did meetups all over the place. Wow. Yeah. So there's been quite a bit of impact been inside the community, and we've gotten awards, I guess, to show that there has been. Also, the number of people using the self-service, so actual developers using it, there's always numbers there as well. But yeah.
Yeah, but it sounds like you were able to kind of focus on the kind of like those real deep engagements like conferences, events, meetups.
Absolutely, creating content. We're working on. We still haven't edited that, but like documentation is still on a to do. We created these SDKs to consume it. We even embedded a version of Daytona inside their docs. So if you go to InfoBip's documentation, where the code snippets are, you can actually hit run. It'll open up a browser-based editor. It'll spin up the develop environment, and you can send an SMS literally right away. Like it works automatically out of the box. And the idea is that engineers can actually test the API before checking anything out. They just have to log in. That's it.
Oh, that's very cool. Yeah. Yeah. And was that hard to kind of get, like, you know, implement that as like a within the organization, or everyone was pushing?
Well, depends. So for that specific, it wasn't that hard. But for other things, I think for anyone, and you see this with companies now, you have companies that are bottom up that are now trying to switch top down. So you have like Notion and Airtable, even Twilio are all bottom up companies that are now trying to convert to enterprise because that is where the expansion is. And that's hard. And the same thing is vice versa when you have an enterprise focused company that is now going, or top down, that is now going bottom up. It's a very hard adjustment because everyone inside the company, and when you have large hierarchies, have one mindset. And these are two very different ways of selling a product. And so it sort of depends on what you're trying to achieve and how that aligns in people's minds, right? So I think creating a product for self-service or to consume self-service itself was not that hard of a sell versus doing, meetups across, the African continent was a much harder sell.
Yeah.
Because the metrics are fuzzy, right?
Yeah. So, because I feel like this is a really kind of like key issue, because I even I know someone who's a user researcher, and you get insights, and these insights show that you need to make changes, which is great. But that's only such a small part of the job, because it's like the big part is actually getting people to get on board with those changes. And I don't know if it sounds like a lot of your job would be to help push. I don't know if that's the right word.
Negotiation. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wonder if you've got any kind of tips or things that you learned along the way.
So I think you have to have a spot, and I've seen people not succeed. And I think the key for us being able to, and there were hard moments for sure. There was moments where I was like, screw this, I'm out. Like, I don't want to do this. The good thing was that because I was acquired by the founders, I really worked hard to keep that relationship with the founders and essentially have them as a sponsor to what we're doing, because it's really hard because, you have everyone has their OKRs in the team, right? In the company, and everyone's pushing their agenda. I mean, for the sake of the company, but each one has their own agenda on how they want to achieve it. And so there's only finite resources that you can have. And so if you can have a high enough sponsor, then they sort of give you, quote unquote, I won't say like protection, but they set you up to succeed. It's like, let them do what they're planning to do, because the time to horizon for this, because bottom up is not tomorrow, right? Bottom up is not sales. It's not like you have to make 100 calls today and then close, one or whatever it is. It's like, it is just like general awareness, going to events, and then it sort of picks up. But the good part about bottom up and, scaling we're talking dev tools now, once you have that bottom up motion done, it starts growing by itself. It's scalable. You don't have to add headcount to scale the amount of people learning about you, right? So, everyone knows, I'll take the example again, Twilio. Everyone knows about Twilio, every developer. They don't have to keep scaling DevRel people. They've actually cut back on it for people to know about Twilio. But if you're top down, you have to scale sales and customer success people as you scale the number of customers, right? So it's a very different ballgame. And if you can have that sponsorship sort of, I think that will help you. If you don't, it is very, very hard. And I've seen a lot of people sort of just leave, quit, get fired because it just doesn't work out.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's like a pattern I've seen among companies I've spoken to. It seems to be if a company focuses on something, it's because the founders or the top people care about it, and it's very, very hard to be good at something that they don't care about.
Absolutely. And so if you go to a company, so I'll make this up, a company that's 500 people, and the founders did not say, we want this, we're going to say top down, switching to bottom up or adding, and they want a DevRel person. If the people that decided it are lower down and you don't have that sponsor higher up, you're probably going to fail because because they'll see the investment in the sense of cost on the Excel sheets at the end of the month or year, but they won't see the, inbound effect yet because it takes a long time to get there. And then that's when the friction arises.
Yeah, that's I think that's a really, really important point. So we are in a very interesting studio where we had to do all the production ourselves. So I think we're running out of time a little bit.
Okay.
Even though I have so many more questions for you, Ivan. So could you tell us a bit about how you're thinking about Daytona and how you're thinking about taking what you've learned from InfoBip and Shift and kind of thinking about growth for Daytona?
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things that was interesting with Shift is that organizing a conference, it's a developer conference, it was both top-down and bottom-up sales, in the sense sales, if we can call them that, because top-down, the sponsorships are large enterprises, so Microsoft, Docker, Red Hat, whatever. So it has the same sales motion as a top-down sales. And then you have people that buy tickets, which is bottom-up, right? You have to have that community that wants you there. So when we were building that conference, we were doing both at the same time. Before that, when I was at Code Anywhere, I was doing just bottom up because I didn't know about enterprise sales. And then when I was at InfoBip, I was working on bottom up, but I was the purchaser as a top down. So I was an enterprise person, right, buying things. So I was now for the first time in that seat, and I could finally understand what that buyer was like and what they needed. And so now going into Daytona, we've looked at the market and we're looking at who's doing what, and we see Codespaces doing a great job, GitHub's product, but they're bottom up. They're a SaaS product. They're focused mostly, although companies can use it. The way they're set up, they're focused on a bottom up motion and individual developers. What we learned at Code Anywhere is that this type of product will succeed only, and this is our thesis, if it's a top down motion. And so learning that at Code Anywhere, that's where we decided to push our initiatives now with Daytona. And the learnings, again, being at InfoBip, of how people think in the position of a company has helped a lot, because I think when you start a new company, a lot of us don't have that sort of corporate experience or never will be. And it's sort of hard to do a top-down motion because you don't understand these things. They're like beyond me that someone would pay $100,000 a year or $1 million a year for a contract for software. I think like that would be insane. But now I know that that's not insane and that people do buy these things. And so when going for Daytona, again, there was a couple learnings, but also we firmly believe that GitHub's Codespace is doing great, and they're telling the world it's a great product, but they don't offer an enterprise solution. So what we're looking for is we're basically encouraging them to keep doing what they're doing, which is preaching that this is a good thing, and then we're going out and offering it to enterprises with very specific needs of the enterprise, security, stability, on-prem, and stuff like that. But yeah.
So yeah, you're kind of making sure to hit both kind of categories, but the top down is like kind of probably
So we're letting GitHub do the bottom up,
yeah,
and the marketing to the developer community, and then we sell to the top down that they cannot offer.
So you won't at all really worry about bottoms up at all?
Not for so bottoms up in the sense of you will be able to download a version of Daytona and set it up on your server or cluster or whatever it be. That will be there. There'll be that motion. But the individual developer as a SaaS product, we're not going to launch that in the foreseeable future for now.
Yeah. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, which is really interesting because a lot of startups that I speak to, it's kind of like gospel that it's always bottoms up. But I mean, I've told everyone on the podcast, I worked in sales at Stack Overflow, and it was kind of everyone's always astonished that they even had a sales team. And yeah, it works. So it can work, which is surprising to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's really cool that that's actually like where you're planting the flag. Like this is
absolutely. I think it's counterintuitive. Like most dev tool companies are bottom up, and I think that's the way to do it. The specifics of this type of company is that as a bottom up, it usually requires a lot of compute, which comes at a very, very high cost. And so yesterday, I think Replit is very similar to Code Anywhere, just a decade later, and they're now worth $1.2 billion. So they came sort of at a better time than we did. but they're cutting out free hosting and all these things because there's a huge amount of compute cost that is incurred because of this, right? And you have to give it out as a SaaS product. So that's one of the reasons why a Codespaces, which is owned by Microsoft, which has Azure, is someone, or an AWS can do that very well because they own basically the cloud, right? And you as a startup is not where I want to be. That's not the fight I want to pick.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if you had like one or two kind of like very kind of quick takeaways that you think founders should take away from your experiences, what would they be?
So the way I'm setting up the company now is it's really hard to do, but I really think that everyone should be essentially DevRel partially. So as you mentioned before, like everyone should be singing the gospel of the company. And I feel that people have, different takes on this. There's engineers that don't want to do it at all. They feel very like shy or that it's not important. But there's ways to do it that are very easy on them. So like our colleague will, set up just video calls with the team or just audio calls and then just record them, then transcribe that and then create that into a post or whatnot. And so the reason why I think everyone in the team should be partially DevRel is that the people that make the product are the ones that can tell the story the best, I think, and are the most believable, right? You have great DevRel people and you can hire them and bring them to the company, but the people that have actually built it, I think are the most believable. And if you can create what I'm trying to do, if you can create a culture of your company while you're small, that it's everyone's job to do just a bit. Like you don't have to jump on planes and go to conferences. You can do like a Zoom call with someone or just be inside or Discord or Slack, whatever it would be, just like be part of the community and sort of tell that story. I think that you can get a much greater impact or to the audience. I think it'll be more believable to the audience being potential users, and it will help you orchestrate your mission as a company if you build that early in. I mean, that's my thesis right now, and I was talking to a couple of people. I think we'll do a Twitter space about this as well. Do you sort of like outsource it to a DevRel team, or do you do it like have everyone do that right now? I'm currently in the boat of like trying, when you're a small company, we're 11 people, trying everyone to be part of that right now. So that's what I would try.
Yeah, everyone should be DevRel.
A bit.
Okay. Awesome. So if people want to learn about Daytona or hear more from you, where can they?
So Daytona.io is the website. Not much there yet, but there will be. Actually, there's a pretty big blog there. You can read a lot of stuff. But also first name, last name, Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere, at Gmail. It all works. So I'm pretty transparent.
Ivan Burazin.
Ivan, Ivan Burazin. Thanks
Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you again soon.